Begin today the Gemara on Daf Nun Hey Amud Aleph, Omar Rabba. The Gemara continues in connection to what it said before, Halacha, and it mentioned the union of Dina de Malchus Dina. So the Gemara begins over here with this subject. Omar Rabba, Rabba said, or the other girsa here is that this is Rove. Hanit Las Mili, the following 3 points, Ishtoili Ukvan Bar Nechemya, Reish Galusa. So he told it to me. Who told him? Ukvan Bar Nechemya, which was the Reish Galusa, the head of the Yidden in the time then in Galus. B'shmei Shmuel, and he said it to me in the name of Shmuel. So the first one. Now all 3 points are really connected to this same nekuda of Dina de Malchus Dina. So the first thing he said was Dina de Malchus Dina. The laws of the king, of the government, are laws that al pitayra you have to follow. And Rashi he brings, this is really a sugi in the Gemara in Bava Basra, and there the Gemara says that the proof for this is that the government builds bridges and it takes away even from private properties, and it uses all things from people to be able to build these bridges. And we travel on these bridges. It's not considered to be Geneva because it's the law of the country that this is how it should be built and this is how it should be done. And therefore, if according to the law this is how it should be done, so then we have to follow it. Another halacha he said, V'arisusu de Parsoi, and by the Persians, when they are living and using a piece of land, ad mem shnin, up until 40 years, meaning by them, their law is that after 40 years that you're sitting in a property and you're using it, that is considered to be proof that it's yours. Anything less than 40 years is not proof. 40 years. Yeah. So the Rashbam explains that there's 2 things that are relevant from this halacha. Number one, the Gemara before in the Perikeh brought that if a Yid bought a property from a guy and that guy bought the property from another Yid before, so now if this Yid has a chazakah 3 years and he says that I bought it from this guy, it's not going to be a good chazakah. Because the guy that he bought it from, a guy doesn't have, the halacha of chazakah, which is 3 years, does not apply to a guy. So this guy that you bought it from, unless you're going to have proper proof that this guy has a shtar, that he bought it from that yid that originally owned it, if you say you bought it from this guy, it's not going to be any chazakah. That's halacha we learned before. So now what the Gemara here is saying is, but since the law in the country is that by goyim after 40 years you do have a chazakah, so if you bought it from a guy and that guy you bought it from lived there 40 years, we're going to follow the law that that guy has proof from the 40 years that it's his. And therefore now, if this Yid bought it from this guy, he will have a chazakah. Another thing that Rashbam says is, b'nigeya to a Yid himself, that by Yidden, in this place, the chazakah is going to be 40 years, not 3 years. And over here, we follow the law of the country, that chazakah, even for a Yid himself, Dina de Malchus Dina, the chazakah is 40 after 40 years. A third halacha, v'hani zaharuri, and these landlords, the zavan ara letaske, they buy properties from the government officials, from the authorities that sell people's properties that don't pay their property taxes. So the government goes and sells these properties, and they sell it to landlords, to rich people. So they buy these properties. The Zavan Ara Lataska, they buy it, and because they're going to be paying property taxes. Zavinu Zvini. When they bought it, it's a good acquisition. It's not considered to be a geneva because the people that were supposed to pay tax did not pay the tax, and it's the law of the country, and your property itself is meshubit to that tax. So if the government sells it now because you weren't paying and you buy it, so it's a good sale. Now, Bahanimili says the Gemara, when is this lataska? That's if the property was being sold because the owners of the property did not pay property tax. But if the property was sold because this person did not pay head tax, it's not a tax related to the property. There's a certain head tax that every person has to pay a certain amount per year. If the property was sold for that, then the sale is not a good sale. My time, why? Karge akarkev the gavri monach. Head tax is something that lies on the head of the person, which means the government has other ways of how they get a person to pay his head tax. It's not the karka which is meshubah to it. It's they'll take a person, they'll imprison him, they'll force him to pay other ways. But it's not, the karka is not meshubah to this payment of the head tax. So if you go out and buy a property because the owner of this property did not pay his head tax, so then it's not according to the Dina de Malchusa that you bought it. So therefore the sale will not take effect. However, Rav Huna Bered Rav Yeshua, regarding this last point, Rav Huna Bered Rav Yeshua argues, and he says, no, afil is sari de kada, even barley that you have that's in a barrel or in a jug, that's already cut and it's in a jug, Mishtabdi lekarga. There could be also a lien or a shibud on this item for the head tax that you owe. So just like on the metaltalin that a person owns, there's a shibud of the tax of the head tax for this. So the same thing also on the karkais. Even on the properties of a person, there's a shibud mitzagadinu de malchusa on the properties for this head tax. So if the government sells it to someone because he didn't pay his head tax, it does follow the dinu de malchusa dina that the sale will take effect. So Amar Ravashi said about this halacha, Amalei Huna Bar Noson said to me, Kashi ba Ameimer. Regarding this opinion of Rav Huna Bereder Rav Yeshua, Ameimer asked the following question. Im Kain, if this is the case, Batalta Yerushas B'nei B'chayr. It's going to come out that the halacha regarding a firstborn, a B'chayr, where the Torah says that he gets a double portion, but because of what you just said, that if there's unpaid taxes, there's a shibud on the karka, and therefore this karka could be taken away from the owner. So in such a case, the b'chayr will not get his double portion. Now, what's the Gemara based on over here? So the Gemara explains, because the halacha by a b'chayr that gets a double portion, when is that? So the Rashbam here brings the pasuk. It says, "B'chol asher yumatzalai." Only what the father actually has now in his possession when he dies, that a b'chayr gets a double portion. If someone owed the father money, or if it's something that will come to the inheritance here after the father passes away, but at the time that the father passes away, it's not yimutz, it's not there yet, on that there's no halacha of getting a double portion. So over here as well, the Gemara says, regarding this property, if the father did not pay his taxes before he passed away, so the havalei ra'oi, this is going to be considered to be something which is not really his in his possession. Even though he has it, he owns it, but the fact that there's taxes that he has to pay in it, and he didn't pay his taxes yet, and there's a shibud that the government can come and take away that property and sell it to whoever they want, and it'll take effect, the sale, as the Gemara just said over here. So therefore, what Huna Bar Noson asked is, you're saying that even benigay, not only property tax, even just head tax. If a person did not pay his head tax of that year and he passes away, so now because of that head tax, there's a shibud on the karka that the government could just take it away. So it's not considered to be really something that's in the possession of the father that died. Even if afterwards the Yorshim go and pay that tax, but now they paid it off afterwards, it's too late. So the b'chayr should not be able to get his portion. The halach is the b'chayr does not get his double portion by something which is only roy, something which will be the father's later on, after he passes away, like something which was already muchzik, which you already had when he passed away. Now the Rashbam says on this question of Ameimar, that's not really such a strong question. Maybe maybe in such a case, Taka, where a person dies and he didn't pay the tax, then the halacha regarding this property, there won't be a din of getting a double portion like a b'char and a chanami. Some Rishonim add to this and say that the Gemara is asking this because we see ma'asim b'chol yaim, that a person dies and he didn't pay his tax yet, and we still give the b'char a double portion. Therefore, the Gemara is asking this. Or I may ever ask this. So Amalei, so Ravashi says back that you're asking this question on what Rav Huna Bereder Rav Yeshua said regarding the fact that when there's a head tax, that this takes away the real ownership that you have in a property, there's a shibud on the property. But why asking only mitzad head tax? Going back to the point that was said before in the name of Shmuel regarding property tax. You can say the same thing, that if a person dies and he didn't pay his property tax yet, so now there's a shibud on his property that the government can take away at any time, so there should be no halacha of b'chayr getting a double portion. So, true. So, what are you going to answer? The Yov Taske Omis. That when do we say that a b'chayr gets a double portion? It's only if he actually paid his tax. So, Hachanami. So, regarding head tax as well, the Yov Karge Omis, it's only if he paid his head tax and dies, then the b'chayr gets his double portion. So, the Gemara is saying this, that we see that we give a b'chayr a double portion, Ma'asim b'chol yaim, and you may think that that's whether the father paid his tax, whether he did not pay his tax. So the Gemara is saying, no, according to what we said before, Dina de Malchusa Dina and Echanami, it's only in a case where the tax was paid, then it's fully his, and therefore the b'chayr will get his double portion. Amar Ravashi said, Amali Huna Bar Noson also told me, Shaltinu l'safri de Rove. I asked the scribes by the Rove that had a bezdin about this subject in a case where a person dies and the taxes weren't paid, so we had two opinions here. Is it only regarding the property tax that we say that you can confiscate? And if you sell, that the sale is in effect, or even regarding if the head tax was not paid, there's also a shibud in the karka. So he asked them, according to whose opinion do we paskin? They told me, we paskin like Rav Yeshua, that even just for head tax, there's a shibud on the karka that the government can sell. And the Gemara says, Veloihi, but that's really not true. What the scribes by Rav said, it's not the halacha. Hasam over there, loikumi milse hudam the amra. Or the Amri. These scribes said this because they wanted to establish that the kind of shtaris that they wrote for this kind of sale, in a case where it was just a head tax that was owed, and they wrote shtaris for such a kind of sale, that the sale should take effect. So they were saying that the halacha is like Rav Yeshua, because they wanted that those shtaris that they wrote in such a kind of circumstance to be in effect. But not that that's the actual halacha. The halacha is actually only like what Shmuel said, that only in a case of a property tax is there a shibud that the din of the malchus din says that that the government can sell it. But in the case of a head tax, the government has other ways how they get that collection of that tax, and there's no shibud in the karka itself. And if it's sold, it's not part of the din of the malchus din, and the sale will not take effect. The Rishonim here explain regarding this point. I think the Rambani says, others say that this halacha of din of the malchus din is only a kind of law that the lashon that's used there, din of malchus, that basically all governments, it's a normal thing that all governments follow this set of rules. What happens if a king decides to make a certain decree, something that this individual king makes a decree that's something ridiculous, that malchus, governments in general, don't make such kind of laws, then over there you don't say din of the malchus din. So over here, basically, the discussion is regarding the karga, the head tax, whether you could say that if you don't pay a head tax, does that mean that now they can confiscate your house, your property? Is that qualify as a normal din of the malchus din, or is that something already out of the bounds of din of the malchus din, which is something already too extreme that we don't include it in this? That's basically the basis here of this machlokes. Sagt the Gemara weiter, v'amar Ravashi. Ravashi said, pardacht. A pardacht, what's a pardacht? A person that is basically a good for nothing. He doesn't work, he doesn't learn, he doesn't do anything. I think I saw that some say that the source of this word, pardacht, is made up of two words. Puri Dochter, that's it. Yeah, thank you. Puri Dochter means his place is his bed or his couch. He just sits on the couch all day and he doesn't do anything. Now, this person, so what happens when the taxes have to be paid by the people of a city? Now, everybody has to give their share of taxes. Okay, now this pardacht, so Messiah Masa, he has to help out others in the city for paying for the taxes. Now, what this means over here is that this pardacht, so he doesn't have any money to pay. So what happens in such a case? The king has a certain set price every year of what he wants to get for the taxes of the people of this city. So if one person is not going to pay, so everybody else is going to have to pay more to make up for him. So this pardach, which is not paying, so because everybody else is paying in his place, so Messiah Masa, he has to make an effort to help out the people of the city to be able to pay their taxes because they're paying for him. But I want to clarify, that's only in a case where, as I just mentioned, he's not paying it, but everybody else in the city is basically helping him out because they're paying instead of him. Mm-hmm. So if he has funds, he should chip in and pay. Aval andiski, but if it's a case of andiski means that the government comes and they go around to collect and they miss this person. His mazel, they missed him, they're not collecting from him. Or the Rashbam says not that they missed him, they see that he's a good for nothing and he has no penny to his name, so they decide to leave him out and they don't collect from him. And they're not collecting from the rest of the city more because he's not paying. Mm-hmm. So in such a case, Siyata Dishma'i, he has, the Eibishter is helping him, so he doesn't have to then chip in with the rest of the city. Okay, this is a conclusion of an Inyan that was brought up before about Dineh, the Malchus Dineh. Now the Gemara goes back to a discussion that it had before regarding the kinyan of chazakeh of nal godar parats. When you make a chazakeh on a property, the Gemara before brought the halacha that when you have two properties that were from a nichsi ager and they're side by side, and now it's hefker, the ger died, and there was a shvil in between, or the Gemara calls it a metzer. There was this border in between, and you were machzik in one property, and you want that this act of chazakeh in one should work for this and another property beside it. So the Gemara said it doesn't work that way because there's a metzer in between that separates the two. The king will work for one property and not for the other. Now the Gemara will bring this halacha back and add details to this. Sagt the Gemara, Amar Ravasi, Amar Rav Yechanan. Ravasi said in the name of Rav Yechanan, Hametzer, this border, which is basically like this pathway that separates between one and another property, and they're both of this property of this ger, which is hefker. On chotzev, this is trees that are planted between properties, or maybe grass that are planted between properties. It's a kind of tree that Rashbam says that's planted between properties. It doesn't have the roots like regular trees that spread out to the sides that go into the two properties. These are roots that go straight down, and therefore they're used to plant between properties. So if you plant this between two fields and two parts of a property, mafsikin b'nichsei ager, they will be a break between the two fields of a ger that died and left them, and they're now hefker. That if you make a chazaka in one, what's on the other side of this metzer or mechzav will not be included in your kinyan chazaka. You have to make a separate kinyan chazaka on the other side by the nichsei ager. But regarding the halacha of peye, or regarding halacha of tumeh, which the Gemara is going to elaborate upon here and explain, so this metzer, this in between, whether the metzer or the mechzav, by peye and tumeh, it's not considered to be a break between the two parts of this field. However, when Ravin came, he said in the name of Rav Yechanan, even regarding pei and tumeh as well, the pathway between these two parts of the field, or the mechzav, these trees that are planted in between these two parts of the field, is considered to be a break between them. So the Gemara explains, Peya Mahi, what's the relevance of the halacha for Peya? So that because we learned in the Mishnah, Ve'elu mafsikin lepeya, the following things will be considered to be a break in a field for the halacha of Peya. So the halacha of Peya is that you have to leave over in the corner of the field for the poor people. So when you have the following things that the Mishnah says here, it's considered to be a break in this field, that now it's two sadais, it's two different fields, and you have to give separately Peya from this field and also from the other. And what are those things? Hanachal, if you have a stream of water that goes in between, or vashlulis, a puddle of water, of rainwater that gathers there, that's a break in between. Now, the derech harabim, or if you have a pathway, a street, a big street that's 16 amas wide, that goes in between these two fields, or even less, the derech hayachid, or if you have a way of a yachid which is only 4 amas wide for individuals to pass through, or shvil harabim, a pathway that many people make a shortcut through there, or even less, shvil hayachid, a pathway which even just one person goes through there, hakavua, but it has to be something which is a set that it's established, that it's all the time. The person walks through there, ben bim moisachame, ben bim moisachshamim, whether it's in the summer, whether in the winter. This is a pathway that people go through there. And so these are all things that will separate this into two different fields that you have to give pay separately on each side. So as you see here in this Mishnah, when it brings these things that separate between one and the other part of the field, it's saying it in the oifen of loizu avso. It starts off with having a stream of water, and then it says you have street, and even less. Even when you have just a little pathway that one person has as a shortcut going through these two parts of the field, as long as it's kavua, that separates them into two fields. However, regarding a metzer or a chotzav, so that is a machlokes between Rabbi Basi and Ravin, what Rabbi Yechanan held, whether it would be considered to be a break, enough of a break, that it's two different fields, or it's not two different fields. But when you get to the kinyan of chazakah, it's definitely considered to be a break, that the kinyan of chazakah on one side is not going to help for the other side. When it comes to the kinyan of chazakah, we already had even actually an opinion before Shmuel that said that if you just dig in one part of the field, it's not going to be a chazakah for the entire field. You have to dig, you have to do work in the whole area. It's only a chazakah in that one little area. But even according to Rav, that says that when you dig in one area, it's a kinyan for the whole place, but it has to be clear that there's no break in between. Even this kind of a break, a metzer and a chotzav, regarding chazakah, the svara is that it's considered to be a break. But by peyeh, here there's a machlokes. Now, what's the case of tumeh, where there's a machlokes about this? Tumeh maihi, it's not, the Mishnah says regarding tumeh. Now, the basis of this Mishnah here by tumeh is the halacha that a suffix tumeh, b'reshus hayachid, is tumeh. We learn out from a saita, just like by a saita, where a man and a woman in a private place in a reshus hayachid, and there's a suffix whether they had a relation or not, and there's a suffix if she's tamei or not. So over there, we're machmer that she may not live with her husband. So from there we learn out any suffix tumeh that's in a reshus hayachid is tamei. But now here this Mishnah talks about a unique kind of suffix. Hanichnas lebika b'meisak shamim. a person that entered into a big valley that has many different fields in it during the winter season. And the reason why we're talking specifically about the winter season, because in the winter is when these are grain fields, and that's the time when it's planted. And people don't just walk there because they don't want to step over the fields. So therefore, in the winter, it's defined as a Rishus HaYachid. During the summer, when everything is already cut and there's nothing there in the fields, so then it's the Bikah is open and people walk through there, then it's a Rishus HaRabim. So it's speaking over here about a time when it's a Rishus HaYachid. Now, he walked into this big valley, but v'tumeh besada plainis. There's tumeh in one specific field of this valley. V'amar, and the person says, halachti l'makam alaz. I went into this valley, but ve'eni yedeyam nechnasti lo'isem makim. But I'm not sure if I entered into this specific field where that tumeh is, ve'im lav or not. So what's the halach in this case? So here you have a suffix tumeh, which is in an area that's a rishus hayachid regarding tumeh. Rabbi Eliezer mitaher. Rabbi Eliezer says that in such a case you're going to be tahir. The chachamim mitamin. And chachamim say that you're tameh in such a case. Now, what's the shot of this machlokes here? Shahoy Rabbi Eliezer said, suffix biyeh, in a case where a person has a suffix, whether he entered into that specific field where the tumah is, toy, he's going to be toy. Suffix maga, if you know you entered into that specific field where the tumah is, but you have a suffix whether you touched the tumah there in that specific field, then tumah, maga tumah, that is, whether you touch that tumah, then you're going to be tameh. Okay, so the way that Rashbam explains the shit of Rabbi Eliezer is that this is what's called a sfek sveike. There's a double suffix here. You have a suffix whether you b'chlal you walked into this valley, but you have a suffix whether you walked into that specific field where the tumah is. And then the second suffix is even if you did walk into that specific field where the tumah is, but you have a suffix whether you touched the tumah in that field. So the halacha of suffix tumah in the Rishus HaYachid is only if it's one suffix, but if it's a double suffix, then you're going to be tired. That's the Rashbam's explanation for this. However, Rashi and Taisus brings here has a different explanation, and Rashi says that it's not because of the sfek sveike. That's not the point. Really, in a Rishus HaYachid, even if it's a sfek sveike, you'll also be tameh. But the nature of the suffix is different than the saita. By the saita, there's no suffix biyah. There's no suffix if these two people enter together into this private place together. They were privately together. Elamai, we have a suffix if there was tumah or not. So over here, the nature of the suffix is different because there's a suffix if you b'chlal walked into that area, into that field, so therefore it's not similar to the suffix of saita, so you're going to be tahir. Now the explanation of the chachamim, why do the chachamim disagree? So over here there's also machlekes rishonim, what's exactly the pshat on the chachamim. So according to the Rashbam, the chachamim say that the entire bikah is considered to be one large field. We don't divide it as considered to be different fields. So therefore, according to the Chachamim, you can't define it as a sveike. It's not one suffix that I walk into that field and another suffix that I touch the tumah in that field. The whole bikah is like one field. So it's really one suffix. I walked into this area, that I touched the tumah or not. That's the Rashbam's hezbeh for this. But other Rishonim disagree, and other Rishonim say that according to the Chachamim, the reason why you're going to be tameh, Chachamim are metame, it's because the Chachamim hold that even if you have many sfeikes, it is a sfek sveike. But even if it's a sfek sveike, it's still going to be tameh because Chachamim hold that in Rishus HaYachid, you could have 100 sfeikes, doesn't matter. It's still going to be tameh. They argue on in this Etzem the Kudah, they hold that sfek sveike is going to be tameh. Okay, now, so what's the Gemara bringing over here? Rabbi Eliezer says that when you go into a big valley, and there's many different fields in it, so we consider each field to be separate. And therefore, if there's a suffix, whether you walk into that field where the tumah is, you're going to be tahir. According to the Rashbam's pshat, because it's a sveike. It's regarding this case that the Gemara is bringing, the machlekes, what Rabbi Yochanan held, if you have these fields that are separated by mechzav, by these trees that are planted there, or by this metzer, is this considered to be enough of a divider between one field and another in this big bikah that Rabbi Eliezer would say that it's a sfek sveika or not? Even though those things that are there, they're not enough of a separation. It's considered to be one big field, and therefore it will not be a sfek sveika according to Rabbi Eliezer. That's the relevance benegay to tumah. Okay, the Gemara is going to bring here a third thing, how this applies also regarding the rishus or hayachid of benegay to Shabbos. But it's a long inyan. It goes down to the next Talmud. We'll continue next time, tomorrow.